Okay, everyone. I think we're about ready to get started. Our final panel of the day is going to touch on the theme of innovation and adaptation amidst an uncertain economy. Without further ado, I'm going to pass to our moderator, Michael Bedard.
For staying with us here in the room and online. I appreciate it. I'm excited to moderate this panel on the future of California's innovation economy. I'm hoping to give you all a peek into the near and maybe distant future of what California's economy will look like, and to explore how innovations in higher education, artificial intelligence, and elsewhere, advanced manufacturing, clean domestic energy sources, and so on, will help drive us toward a more sustainable and inclusive economic future in California. I know we've spent a lot of the day, you all have spent a lot of the day hearing about how we got to this current economic climate, and we'll touch a little bit more on that. But let me first introduce our panelists. Dee Dee Myers is the director of GoBiz, and she has been a great partner with the UC on important initiatives like ARCHES, the Federal Department of Energy's Clean Hydrogen Program, and on the CHIPS Act in terms of looking at whether a national semiconductor facility could be located in California. Really excited to have her with us today. Lance Hastings, the president and CEO of CMTA and a longtime Sacramento government affairs professional, and Daniel Lim, senior director at Salesforce on the Futures team and a recent fellow of the World Economic Forum's AI platform. Please give our panelists a warm welcome. So thank you. Again, I just kind of want to set the stage of how we got to where we are today. And we've heard, again, a lot about our current budget realities and the budget deficits we're in. So if Dee Dee and Lance, if you can start to talk about how historically innovation has driven or played a part in California's economy.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us here today and for moderating this panel. And it's great to be with you, Daniel and Lance, who we work quite closely together on some of these questions. You know, California, it's a great question as to when it started, probably with the gold rush, where this new opportunity, right, to come and to reinvent yourself and to do that by, you know, finding wealth or some new source of revenue someplace far across the land, right? And so people came to California from all over the country and all over the world as a result of that. But for however long, and maybe it even went back before that to our native, you know, or initial residents. But there's always been a spirit here of creativity and of maybe just looking west to the future where the, you know, the sun rises, so, or the sun sets actually. But anyways, it's been a long time, but I think over a long period of time, California has developed not just a reputation, but a deep culture of creativity and of accepting new ideas and of welcoming new people. And that includes people from around the world, right? I mean, immigration has been a key, one of the keys to the success of California. And so whether it was the motion picture industry, which came here partly for the great weather, but also because they were free to come, people from other parts of the world that weren't necessarily welcome there, to the aerospace industry, to the tech industry. I mean, Silicon Valley, you know, the silicon chip was mostly invented here, but the industry was, of course, invented here and has changed the world. The aerospace industry, which continues to innovate, connecting people in the next frontier of space, is, you know, 40% of patents coming out of new space are here. It's not an accident. Those two things to me go together. We have abundant natural resources, lots of people, the greatest higher education system anywhere in the world. I mean, UC produces more patents than any higher education institution in the world, and that creates this cycle of innovation and commercialization and recreation that is the secret sauce of California. And so it is something that is so it's so in our DNA and it's so tied to our future, but we have to be mindful of it and to protect it and nurture it by continuing to do things like make sure people are welcome here, that we don't just talk about it, that we actually live it. So I could go on for an hour, but I'll let Lance just talk about how he perceives this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what Dee Dee said. The gold rush really is the foundation of our entire economy and our governance in 1849. And it's created this notion that's known worldwide called the California Dream. And if we weren't as innovative and forward-looking as we are, we'd be called the California Nap. But people don't come to California to sleep. We come here to do things. We dream big. We act big. And I think the resulting 40 million people that choose to live here have proven that. The companies, particularly the manufacturers that locate here, we're the largest manufacturing state in the country. There's a reason for that. And I often think about the sliver that is California, north-south. What if it were oriented more like the Midwest, where things were actually east-west oriented? We could probably fit 3 California bands across, but there's one. And it's a north-south sliver, the most beautiful coastline in all the world. And I'll argue, I grew up in the East Bay, so I'll say the Bay Area is probably the best climate anywhere in the world, including Italy. It's just this natural beauty, and people have flocked here for generations.
California, so I might fight you on that, but okay.
Well, yeah, we'll fight afterwards. But a beautiful state and a beautiful opportunity. And having said that, the California dream should actually be the California promise. People shouldn't come here anymore to dream. The dream is here, it's real. Now it's really time to take advantage of that. And I think the next couple of years are really going to be a inflection point for California to hold on to that title that we've rightfully earned for the first 180 years of our existence.
Didi, you talked about the access to a workforce, and thank you for referencing the University of California. Thanks to UC for hosting us here today. But a lot of innovation is driven by the movement of capital rather than necessarily the workforce. How do those things sequence in the innovation pipeline?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of chicken and egg in that, right? I mean, I think the capital follows the ideas because you can't. The money will go where the opportunities are, as opposed to the opportunities follow the money, but the money really follows the opportunity. And that's why California has historically, over the last couple of decades, had 50%-ish, give or take in any given year, of all the venture capital that's invested anywhere in the country. And it's a huge percentage of the venture capital that's invested anywhere in the world. And the reason is, again, it goes back to that ecosystem of higher education, like the UCs and our private institutions are great too. And then there's that, that sort of tech spin-off that creates the new businesses that draw finance, right? That creates a workforce. But part of the workforce is our higher education system, not just the UCs, but the Cal States and the California community colleges, right? Which, we produce, probably Cal Poly produces more engineers than the entire Ivy League in any given year, right? We just have way more of it. And then over time, we have not only new people coming out every year, but we have the most experienced, the most seasoned, people who are, driving the new ideas and creating the new industries. And if you look at, every couple of years we have to go through the cycle, and we're kind of in it now, how California's dead, and the wheels are coming off the wagon. And just as that storyline sort of hits its stride, you realize that 35 of the world's biggest, most important AI companies are in San Francisco. They're within probably a 10-block radius, and that's not going to get smaller, right? And I'll leave it to Daniel to elaborate on that. That's going to get bigger, and it creates a whole new cycle of innovation and some challenges. But the people are going to come here to solve those problems and to innovate on these new discoveries, because this is where it happens. And I'll say one last thing: I have had so many people tell me that they would go someplace else to build their company because it might be less expensive, but they can't, because they can't get the talent to drive the industries.
Thank you. So looking to the future, Daniel, it's in your title. How is innovation poised to drive California's continued economic growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually represent the constituents that immigrated to the state. So I came here for the opportunity and the dream, and we're going through another cycle now. We're hearing kids just flocking to Cerebral Valley, or Alley, which is the new Silicon Valley in San Francisco. This is the AI hub. And we obviously, in terms of what innovation is going to drive the growth of this economy, the state, is AI is one of them. There's so much to be worked on in that, just to get AI working to the point we expect, that everyone wants a piece of it. And we're just in the beginnings of that race, and California is in such a great position to take advantage of that. I think Goldman Sachs estimated that globally in the next 10 years, there's going to be about $7 trillion of GDP growth as a result of generative AI. And with the 35 companies already here, California is at the forefront of that innovation. So we need to continue to nurture that. We need to continue to attract the talent. We need to continue to make sure that there's infrastructure, affordable housing, all these great things that will attract people to come, right? Now, technology is my industry, but there are many others. So manufacturing, also energy, right? California has always been a leader in the environmental movement, and with this green transition that we're going through, that industry is going to, California will take advantage of that transition as well. And then lastly, we talked earlier about biotechnology and genomics, and companies like Genentech and Amgen. They're all California-based, right? And all those great scientists that are coming out of the schools, the universities here, want to work and better the world. And what better way to help all of us have healthier lives, right? And California is in a great position to benefit from that innovation as well.
That's great. So I'm glad you mentioned AI, because that's what my next question was about. UC has been thinking about the ethical and appropriate use of AI since before it was cool, since back in 2021. And since then, really the AI revolution, I mean, it's really happened now. We've seen it change. And there's a suite, maybe a dozen or more bills on AI in the legislature right now. So they're covering everything from healthcare to education and how Californians will interface with artificial intelligence and automation going forward. So, Lance or Daniel, what does an AI-powered innovation economy look like in California?
I'll give the manufacturing perspective, then turn to 30,000-foot level for you. So AI is really I think the intersection of what we've been doing for all time in manufacturing, which is to get more efficient. And the way you get more efficient is having more data so that you can make better decisions. And in manufacturing, machine learning has been occurring for quite some time. So that's machines talking to each other in the manufacturing process so that we can be, again, more efficient. When we're more efficient, we're using less energy and we're emitting less. So there's this drive to become much more efficient. But AI, we need to talk about what it is and what it isn't. And in our context, what it is an amalgamation of a lot of information that we can put to good use for manufacturing efficiencies. It's not that the machines are learning what the workers are doing and then transitioning that information from the worker into some other nefarious purpose. That's not AI in our context. So I think it's really important, particularly for public policymakers, to make that distinction of what it is and what it isn't, so we can have an honest discussion. But it affects everyone in this room differently. So I'm giving you the manufacturing context of which we are embracing AI because it's our future. We will be able to be more efficient with how we make things. And I think I'll leave it there to go to 30,000 feet, but I do have to make the point, artificial intelligence is the only kind I have. So.
Thank you, Lance. In the futures community, we've been thinking a lot about artificial intelligence. In fact, my team has been advising our leaders in our company for years that we're all going to have AI autonomous agents sitting next to us 24/7 doing the work for us. And these agents will be, it's similar to, if you can imagine, sci-fi is a great way to kind of help us imagine the future, the movie Her, right? Joaquin Phoenix, his character talking to Scarlett Johansson and having a conversation in which that AI, OS1, is doing some work for him. So imagine the future where you go to sleep, your AI agent is doing the research for you. You wake up in the morning, it gives you a recap on things that found. You decide what you want to cull from that research. We're in the beginnings of that evolution. And in fact, to prepare for this conversation, I used AI, right? Why not, right? And I'm similar with you, most of my intelligence is artificial as well. And it's a great way to kind of help each person get what they need. I'm not a great writer. I'm an immigrant. English is the second language for me. So AI is helping with that. In fact, the early research, there's a researcher in UPenn, Ethan Mollick. He's been looking at the effects of AI on knowledge workers. They did a study with Boston Consulting Group and found that AI is really helping those who benchmark with the lower skills. That means that AI is providing an entire team of consultants a leveling capability. The ones who are the best consultants are getting the least in terms of the benefit from AI. So you can imagine that in the future, there's this potential for AI, if we all get access to it, of a leveling effect for those who are disenfranchised or disadvantaged to have an equal playing field, perhaps, using this technology. So this is just a future that we can imagine. That's a very positive future. There's always risks with technology. I was just having a conversation with Robin before about this. Hammer was a technology at some point, right? At some point, it just becomes a tool. So the question is, how quickly can we let the entire populace adapt to this technology so that it becomes an important tool? In the case of a hammer, building a house, but it can hurt somebody. AI can do the same in the positive and the negative. We just need to figure out how to harness it for the best.
I wanted to add one thing in my comment. I didn't do that. How many are familiar with the Moneyball concept? So the Oakland A's had the mathematician would draft players without ever having to talk to them because the data that was in their profile of all their stat sheets across their entire career said, okay, that person's not going to swing at the first pitch. Built a team, and one could argue a legacy on mathematics without ever talking to a person. We loved that. We embraced it. We made a movie of it. Brad Pitt was the lead. That's the early iterations of artificial intelligence that took all that data and rolled it in across the line. And the A's were very successful. They just couldn't get too far in the playoffs. So it does have its limitations, but that's AI. And the more that we get excited about it like that, as opposed to fearful, as you just described, is really going to be the future. Is kind of how we approach AI rather than how AI approaches us.
Yeah, thank you. And so kind of going back a little bit, you mentioned the study that suggested $7 trillion in capital, and that goes back to our earlier conversation about, so now first comes the capital, or maybe not, but how do we prepare California's workforce for this idea of augmenting but not replacing? How do we integrate it into the workplace where workers feel that they're not being left behind?
Yeah, I think the first is imagine a world where all the knowledge that's available in the history of time that's been digitized is available at your hands. Universities and educators no longer need to teach information and knowledge. They need to teach wisdom. Because the second order effects of getting that much access to information is what we all need to be preparing our next generation for. So this is kind of the early thinking that we're thinking about at Salesforce and our futures team, right? Like the abundance at this moment in time will be information and knowledge. Scarcity is what do you do with it? The judgment, the decision, the thoughtfulness, the wisdom to be able to make positive decisions for society. That's the big difference. I think that's a twist in terms of the education that we need to think about.
And I think really we're needing a harmonization between humans and capital because it takes the two really to make things work. And when we overemphasize one versus the other, we get out of balance. And the future is probably going to be more capital and less workforce, but we have some immediate needs to get us through the next 5, 10 to 20 years in California, notwithstanding our 40 million population, to meet those needs. And in our sector, manufacturing, people would hold their jobs typically for 30 or 40 years in manufacturing. That's 2 generations with one worker life cycle. Right now, as that generation is starting to retire, we're trying to backfill with employees that just like to work maybe 2 or 3 years at a place or a job, and then they want to move around because they get antsy. Our sector is not tooled for that. We're tooled for the long haul, the laddering of skills and experience in the workplace. So that's something that we deal with every day. But I want to make sure that we keep having the harmonization discussion between capital and workforce rather than, okay, now it's all about workforce. I need to find 5 million employees for my sector in the next 5 years, and I panic about that. I also need updated equipment that's more efficient, more fit for purpose, and renewed because capital has a life cycle like everything else. So I want to make sure that we always balance the discussion so that we can meet both needs for the future rather than you fix one and you cause it for the other.
Yeah, thank you. So we mentioned a little bit about ARCHES and the clean hydrogen program. AI is not the only innovation going on in California. We talked about, you mentioned biomedical and other engineering issues. I'm curious, Director Myers, what the state's role is in supporting the innovation economy, and particularly interested in how small businesses, which all these AI companies, Google, Salesforce, they all started out as small companies at one point, and Apple grow and grow. That's the California business story, right?
Yeah.
So what is the role of small business in the innovation economy, and what's the state's role in kind of, creating that environment?
Yeah, well, I think we touch on that, we the state, in a lot of different ways. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy and our communities. We have 4.1 million small businesses in California, and supporting those businesses, particularly with underserved entrepreneurs and owners, is really something that's a high priority for the state. So we invest in those through grants, we have a lot of small business community development centers or development centers all over the state that we support. We provide access to capital in different ways, right? For business owners, we have programs to provide technical assistance to train small business owners. What do they need to do? How do they prepare to go and get capital, loans or grants or venture kinds of money? And we kind of those kind of skill building opportunities, as well as we've opened up procurement. The governor's mandate required that 25% of government contracts be with small businesses, veteran-owned businesses. So those are very important tools for helping small businesses to succeed. And of course, small businesses become bigger businesses. Not only do they support communities, right, providing the goods and services that all of us need in our communities, but they then can become bigger businesses. To the other part of your question about how do we support that innovation, so many of the same things. We provide, we work hard to try to connect companies to available incentives from grants, tax credits, connecting them to lower power rates, helping them navigate the sometimes complicated regulatory environment that we have created here in California, just around the edges, Lance. But just all of those kinds of things to support business, and really targeting a lot of that to some of the more innovative businesses that come here. And then the relationship between regulation and incentives, right, carrots and sticks, is really important to creating an environment where new innovative technologies are what can survive. And a great example of that is Tesla and electric cars, right? Tesla was a small business that grew into a bigger business through the help of a regulatory environment that provided a lot of incentives for people to buy cars, for Tesla to have both investment and tax incentives to do what it did. And the result of that was the electric car industry grew here in a way that it didn't anyplace else. And we also have that, that future-looking consumer base that was interested and willing to give it a try. And Tesla, okay, their stock's down a lot, but they were the proof of concept for electric cars. If you build an infrastructure that supports electric vehicles and you provide good cars, will people buy them? Yes, they will. And the 2 of the 3 best-selling cars in California are electric cars, right? And 40, not quite 40 anymore, but % of the nation's electric cars are here. And that's not an accident. It's that interplay of, again, carrots and sticks of regulation and incentives, and kind of a fertile ground for that idea to take off. So now we're moving on to hydrogen, right? We were fortunate we put together an application. The federal government was providing an incentive to create hubs around the country. California got one. We worked really hard with UC, which was a super fruitful partnership. We got one of the hubs, and so now the next step is to create a balanced ecosystem, supply and demand, of hydrogen users and hydrogen producers, and the distribution system to make that work. And so, our approach to clean energy is all of the above. Every new technology, right? Everything, everywhere, all at once. So, again, to say more about that, but that's some of the ways in which I think the state can help support innovation.
Lance, how do we attract more businesses, more manufacturing back to California, given these kind of innovations that are coming? Is an NTSC, is a national semiconductor facility coming? Are the Arches facilities going to help your folks?
Well, I think everything will help. The problem and challenge that we face right now is that very few boardrooms across the country or the world, when they're looking to locate or expand, does somebody say, let's do it in California. And that's just social commentary on what's been going on for the last many years. It's not something that happened last week or is going to happen next week. So that's the challenge. And the notion that it is more expensive to do business in California is true. That's a fact. But that's not the only reason why people wouldn't locate here. I think there's a concern about what that unknown future looks like, because it's been fairly stable that, yeah, California is going to rock and roll. We have difficulty in particularly the hotter months of the summer with anxiety about the power supply, and manufacturing is process oriented. So to turn off the lights for a few hours is not as easy as it may sound, to the average viewer or listener. It takes, hours and sometimes days to make something, and if you, or even for a short time, you're gonna miss out. So I think while we address the infrastructure issues and needs of the state, roads, highways, water, power, etc., that flips the paradigm. Then California returns its rightful place as the place to go, because that workforce talent base, the IP that we have here, the innovation, and dare I say the California spirit trumps everywhere. We just have to kind of harness back to that day. And I don't need to tell you, for those of you that drove your car here today, you probably hit a pothole or two. And we really need to be attentive to our infrastructure. And infrastructure includes people. It's just not things. So to the extent we focus on our workforce infrastructure and our physical infrastructure, I think California will recapture that spirit, and we'll be off to the races.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you mentioned infrastructure. I want to make sure to mention that the building trades were such an important partner as well in Arches. So really just don't want to forget that. Daniel, I'm curious, Lance just mentioned the California spirit of innovation. What do you think is unique about California that we've seen so much success during the information or digital revolution that's allowed companies like Salesforce and others to really succeed here?
It really starts with a diversity of ideas. And the reason why the PC revolution took off here is because of, I'm old enough to know that there was the Homebrew Computing Club in Berkeley, right? And the out-of-work rocket scientists, because we're no longer going to the moon, are struggling for work. So they started hanging out with the hippies that are in Berkeley. And this diversity of thinking began this change in attitude about where computing was going, because other enthusiasts about computing was thinking about mainframes, people in suits in the East Coast thinking that it will always sit there in these server rooms. Well, the folks in Berkeley and West Coast in the Bay Area had other ideas, right? So we need to foster that environment where exchange of ideas are flowing. So that rich ecosystem that you talked about, both of you talked about, we need to continue to nurture that, because that doesn't happen out of the blue. It doesn't fall off the sky. We need to invite people in, continue to make this place a competitive place for people to live, to work, so that they can share ideas. So that's just one. Second is the UC system. We're here, right? My daughter is making a decision where to go to school. She just committed to Cal Poly, right? It is so attractive to go to a UC school if you're a resident here, because the schools are incredible, and the access to talent, the other talent in the state, and also the access to the community, the industries, the government, it's all right here. California is such a big state. It's a country in it itself, right? So the opportunity is abundant for those to want to stay. The last is access to capital, right? The venture capital community here is one of the few places in the world where it incentivizes risk-taking. It incentivizes making mistakes. And you don't get that anywhere else. As an immigrant, remembering what it's like to live in Hong Kong, everyone just follows the rules. Here, everyone wants to break the rules, right? And you're incentivized to do that. And I think those are the things that we need to continue to nurture, right? And to your point about infrastructure, this is one thing that other parts of the world have done incredibly well. If you go to Singapore, affordable housing is baked into the government in the way that the policies, right? You're able to buy a condo or apartment from the government at an affordable price. Now, we can't quite do that here in California or in the United States, but those policies where it allows the workers to live where they want to live so that they can have affordable housing, affordable infrastructure to get to and from work, right? To be close to their families. Those are important policies that we need to continue to nurture so that we can build this infrastructure that's that's already here, but we need to build on it.
Lance, you've been in the government affairs business a long time. What do you think is needed, or what should policymakers be looking at to sort of continue to foster this environment as we change?
I think we need a paradigm shift in how we talk with each other. And yes, I have been in the business for a long while. And I spent a fair amount of the time in the manufacturing side of things working for a global brewer. So I've been in the beer business. So I've had the opportunity to see the beneficial aspects of socialization and talking and sharing ideas over a beer. But I think right now, particularly in Sacramento and to a different but stronger degree in Washington, D.C., everyone's yelling at each other. And when you yell at each other, you tune the other person out because you're waiting to get your lick in, and then it's just this race to the bottom. And we cannot solve the problems that we need to solve by having conversations like that. So yes, it means we have to have courageous discussions where I can say, this is what we need. Someone else could agree, well, I don't think you need that. Let's have that conversation, and I'll explain why. Because what I'm going to explain is for the betterment of the state or the country, not the betterment of Lance or manufacturing. I do believe that manufacturing is literally at the heart of the economy. It's not an important part of it. It's not nice to have. You must have manufacturing to afford the economy, or what we want to do here in the state, particularly the transition to a different kind of energy future. You cannot do it without a position of wealth. And we are partners in that, but we are the wealth creators at the tip of the spear for the economy. So all that I've been asking lately, the last 6 months, every forum that I've been at, I'm a little bit tired of the government doing things to us, and I think a lot of constituencies would agree with me. But I'm not asking the government to do anything for us. Give me something or to do something. I just want the government to work with us, and that's state, local, federal. Work with us. We're the experts. We often get asked, how long does it take for us to turn off our power for a power outage? We're the only ones who know that. We're the only ones who know how much human capital we're going to need, how much working capital we're going to need over the long term. We're the only ones who know that. So trust in that authentic position coming to the table, and I think we could have great things. But first and foremost, we must stop talking past each other and start having really courageous conversations with each other.
Thanks. How are we doing on time? Okay, we got about 5 more. Okay. I just want the audience to start thinking about their questions. We'll have some time for questions from you, including folks online. But I want to go back and ask all of you kind of what strategies can be employed to ensure Californians, the workers, are equipped with skills and opportunity to continue to drive economic prosperity in this state and to participate in that prosperity.
Again, I was talking to Robin earlier. The digital equity plan that the state has that we're executing against is a great start. Having broadband access for every family, every individual is a must, because the world is going to continue to be more digital. Right? More services, government, health services we deliver through the internet. But that's not enough. You need support, training, because digital literacy to take advantage of those services is the other part of the equation, right? So that's part of the plan. But thinking forward into the future, if you can imagine that AI has the potential of augmenting human intelligence, just like electrification and industrialization did to human labor, we may have to think about access to artificial intelligence as a utility, where all of us, everyone in the community may need to get access just the same, not just those who are in the tech industry or advantaged to have high-speed internet, but everyone. So those are some of the ideas. In fact, I was talking to some of the other folks that are leading the economic development in other states, Didi. They're beginning to think about it in this way. We've been advising them to think about it in this way because technology is not going to slow down. The earlier panel talked about, we need to embrace it. We just need to make sure everyone has access, not just on the current technology, but the ones that are to come.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, is how do we make sure that our prosperity is inclusive, right? And I think that's one of the things the government tries to do, and sometimes with a little bit heavier hand than I know some of our private sector partners want to see. We absolutely have to make both sides, private and public partners in that. But I think that we've made a lot of progress, and there's a lot more progress to be made. And of course, our education system is the foundation of all of that, right? And so the governor has asked us to, California's long had a master plan. He's asked us to rethink the master plan as a career education master plan, thinking about not just, education for education's sake is incredibly important, but so is education that will lead to both creating job opportunities for people, but also creating the workforce that the industries of the future will continue to need in California. And so what we've been asked to do, it's kind of an all of government task, is to look across the economy and figure out what's working, what's not working. What are the skills that people need? Do all these jobs really require a 4-year degree? And sometimes the debt that goes with that. Or can we teach to skills that will give people family supporting career track jobs that don't necessarily require 4 or 8 years of post-secondary education? And so how do we do that? And how do we work with our private sector partners to make sure we are both understanding what the skills needs are and creating curriculum and opportunities for that? And many of them paid. What about paid apprenticeships and internships so people can earn while they learn, so that they can advance their skills to take those jobs that we need to fill, and that will create a better career track for them and help them to afford to live in California. And we have a lot to do on addressing affordability, Lance, to your point. I mean, that is a huge challenge for us. But I think just in terms of continuing to build that workforce pipeline and to continue to create the kind of opportunities that people in California need and deserve, and that will continue to drive the virtuous cycle, that's sort of the task at hand. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity.
It may come as no surprise. I think everything's wrapped up in the narrative, and we have to get the narrative right for our future generations. And this may sound provocative, particularly in this room at this forum. Most California kids don't go to a 4-year university. So let that sink in. Most don't. So we need to pay attention to the most. And how we pay attention to the most, I think, is vitally important to the future of our state. I'm a CSU grad. I applied to one university because I thought I only had one shot at a career in academia or learning. I went to Sac State. Stingers up. I went to Sac State because the state capitol is right across the street. The university is just 40 blocks away. That's why I'm in Sacramento. I applied to no other university. If I didn't make it into Sac State, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So think about the most as we go about it. And don't tell the most, unless you get a degree, you're not going to amount to much, because there are industry sectors, manufacturing, that can provide a career path well into your retirement and your pension days. And we can't belittle that individual at all. And the last, I would say, 15 years or so, we have been doing that. We've closed the equity gap. I think in California, if you want to go to college, community, CSU or US, you're going to get there. You may come out with some debt, but you're going to get there. So we've closed that gap. But we haven't closed that, what do you want to do with the rest of your life gap? And we owe it to everyone, most of the students, to really appeal to that, nurture that, and encourage that, rather than, you're not going to make it. And that's a terrible way to get started when you're 17, 18 years old trying to figure out what you want to do. So let's switch the narrative. There are opportunities for everyone in California, and let's start now so that we don't leave anybody behind in the future.
Thank you. So I'll have one more question, then we'll turn it out to the audience for questions. I'm curious how, just continuing on this, how endeavors like Arches or other kind of government programs that are really pushing a particular industry, NTSC, the National Semiconductor Technology Center, if one lands here, or others, do they have a role in coordinating not just the jobs and infrastructure, but education along with economic development?
I think increasingly industry does see that as part of their role. I think for a long time, they counted on the government to provide education, and then they would take educated workers and train them for whatever the skills they needed. And I think increasingly, given the competition in the world, we have a pretty full employment economy. California, we're a little bit behind, but if you look at the country, we have kind of historically low unemployment. So people are really competing for workers, particularly the most skilled workers. So we need to create more skilled workers. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. To Lance's point, it's exactly what the governor's driving at. We need to create those kinds of opportunities for people who aren't necessarily going to pursue a 4-year degree, or they want a 2-year degree, or they want to do that over a period of time. All of those should be options. And I think increasingly industries is saying to us, one of the things I hear most from the people I talk to is, help us help you train the workforce of the future. How do we work with our community college system, with our private sector partners, with our K through 12 education to prepare to introduce these ideas? A lot of kids go through school, they have no idea that they might have a career in AI or in biotech or some other field that could be real is space, commercial space, or the entertainment business. They've just never known anybody that worked in it. So how do we introduce kids to that? How do we work with people on the ground to tell us what are the skills that you need and how do we train to those so we can continue to send you the best trained, most eager, most accomplished workforce in the world?
I mean, I see these programs as motivating and unifying forces. I'll submit the governor's infrastructure package last summer. We had to get ready for the CHIPS Act. And boy, did we get ready. We locked arms, we worked together, we got it done in a very short amount of time, and we celebrated that victory all together. And those are the kinds of things that I think can get people excited and motivated. And sometimes it has to be that external thing that we can rally around rather than something that we create here in California. So we're all for that. I'm also biased about California. We deserve our fair share. But when we lost the super collider semiconductor, if I said that right, in the late 80s, early 90s, I think we lost a little step. And we've been trying to recapture that back. And I think some of these new programs are helping us do that in a post-COVID environment.
Great. So let's turn it out to the audience, either here or online, if you have questions. If you're in the room, we have a mic.
Yeah, if you have questions, please come on up here. If you have a question,
Hey, folks. The question from Zoom. Certain California industries like Hollywood have achieved a great deal of success in a relatively short amount of time by being early adopters of disruptive technologies. What role can the state play in encouraging adoption of new tech?
I think part of what makes California so successful is that we do have a culture where people are interested in being early adopters of new tech. And so one of our roles in the state is to kind of de-risk the process for making new technology accessible. And that's by providing funding, providing the infrastructure that can help support the evolution of these new industries. And so hydrogen is a great example, right? The goal, so we've created this, we're in the process of creating a hydrogen hub in California that will provide incentives for people to produce green hydrogen, and it will be green hydrogen. And then for that hydrogen to get transported where it needs to go, and then for end users to have access to it, and to reduce the cost of that to a competitive price. For heavy duty transport, it would be the cost of diesel, and our goal is to make to make green hydrogen fuels for trucks the same cost as diesel by 2030. That is hugely important, right? To make it cost effective to adopt. So you have to have reliability, you have to have availability, and you have to have cost competitiveness, and the government can help with all of those things in partnership with the private sector, because we're not going to build the infrastructure for doing all those things, right? We need private sector so we need to create the right incentives so that infrastructure gets built and that it gets used. And we've done it before. We're doing it on clean energy across the board. And electric vehicles is another, passenger electric vehicles, right? It's so funny to hear the news coverage say, oh, gosh, EVs are over. When the rate of uptake continues to increase, it's just increasing a little more slowly than it did. And once the infrastructure gets built out with government incentives at both the state level and the federal level to build more charging stations around the country, that will pick back up, because the lifetime cost of having an electric vehicle is actually less than an internal combustion engine. So those are, there's just again, and sometimes it's incentives and sometimes it's regulations. We also, force sometimes industry and individuals to do things that they don't really want to do. We are going to make the sales of new internal combustion engine cars and light trucks, we're going to phase that out by 2035 in California. And other states have followed our lead. That's an audacious and ambitious goal, right? And it says it's going to change the way people behave and the way cars get sold and bought in California. But the net result of that will be we will move more quickly to a less carbon-intensive transportation system, which will be fantastic for the health. We will save billions of dollars just on health costs from people not having to breathe the particulate matter and greenhouse gases that are created through fossil-based transportation. So, it's carrots, it's sticks, it's pushing people sometimes farther than they want to go, but also reminding them of the benefits that the entire community will reap.
Daniel, does the private sector have a role in helping people accept the new technologies as they come online?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all is to make the technology, right? So some of my colleagues are actually in an innovation day with the California government on a public sector innovation day, showing what enterprise software could help in terms of delivering services to you all as citizens. So that's one part of it. The second part is making the technology safe and trusted. Our number one value at Salesforce is trust, because we understand that in order for our customers, which is the businesses and the governments from around the world, to buy our product, they have to trust the fact that the product is going to do what it's supposed to do. So that's our job, right? The third is to have conversations like this, right? The open exchange of ideas that I talked about earlier. This is how better ideas come about, right? We need to work through it. And one of the points about technology adoption is that typically the early adopters don't win, don't benefit. They take on all the risks. They make all the mistakes, and everyone else learns from it, right? But you also don't want to be the last to adopt technology, because then you'll be behind. And manufacturing is one of them, right? Berkshire Hathaway is a great example, right? Those mills that were last in adopting technology, they went out of business. So there needs to be kind of this balancing of which the adoption of technology needs to be easy enough. It needs to be sitting right in the middle where it's ready for everyone to adopt. It can't be bleeding edge, because that's risky, but it can't just be old technology. And we need to make sure that everyone understands what that sweet spot is. So our job is also to educate what that sweet spot is, and when is that, when advising companies or leaders on when that point is to adopt the technology.
I think there's a couple of things in California in our ethos that really drive what you both just described. It's the concept of fail fast, but also bring the future forward faster. So let's fail, let's figure it out, let's bring that future forward, because we're so innovative and looking for the next opportunity. That's really what drives California, and I think sets us apart from all of the other states, even though our neighbors most proximate to California. So they're two very complementary concepts. Individually, it could be a problem. If you don't have a fail fast attitude, you'll hang on to things a little too long. But just wanting to bring that future forward is really, I think, what drives and set us apart since the mid-1800s. Let's bring it forward faster.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Janet Riley from the UC Board of Regents. And first of all, thank you so much for this conversation. It's terrific and exactly what this building is meant for, to have these kinds of conversations. Earlier in the day, Jerry Nicholsberg from the UCLA school talked about the important role that AI is going to play in the future and economic growth of California. And he put up a slide of the top AI companies in the country, most of which were here in California, but a few that were in New York, a few that were in Boston. And so my question is, how can we make sure that California remains dominant in the AI sector? I know we have lots of things going for us, like the VC, the capital, the VC money that's here, the great universities that are here. But what else can we do to make sure that California really remains the dominant player in this space?
Yeah, I can start. I think part of that is just affordable housing. We've talked about it as a major issue in the state. The Silicon Valley ethos, which is moving here and trying to make something, create something. The Cerebral Valley idea as well. These kids are sleeping on couches because they want to be part of this gold rush. But they can't afford to live here. The only way they can actually come is to sleep on somebody's couch for now, until they are able to earn a decent salary, right? But innovation in early stages doesn't pay. So, obviously there needs to be we need to fix that one issue, which is making it affordable. I think the other is that continuing education that you mentioned. It's not just at the higher level. We need everyone to be more educated and be ready to work, right? Because as companies grow, you can't just have everyone be a CEO or be a software engineer. You need somebody to be fixing the building or fixing the tools or providing the other services that are needed to have a thriving economy. So I think we need to think holistically about the education. So you mentioned that earlier, and skills-based or training programs that are training people for jobs of the future, not just for now.
Yeah, and I would add that you talked about trust, which is so critical, and particularly in a new technology like AI that has that gives people significant and understandable anxiety. So we need a regulatory environment that's thoughtful and that is calibrated to, because we don't know what the future is going to look like, and yet we need to think about things that we're dealing with now. And so, how do we do that? We're not there. I think somebody mentioned how many bills there are. I think there are 40 plus in the legislature. Yeah. In the legislature right now, right, dealing with AI in this session, and everything from how do you watermark content so people will know whether it was generated through AI or, how do we, what about, and this is something Salesforce has raised, the amount of energy needed, right, and the amount of energy to run a data center is so extraordinary, and it's going to increase exponentially as we move down this road. How do we make sure that those data centers are sustainable? Right, the amount of energy and water required to process all that data is going to be a huge challenge for us, and a huge challenge here in California. And we don't want to outsource all of those to places that are going to run them with coal or even natural gas. And so I think there's a lot. The governor's asked us, what we're doing right now is looking at how can we use AI to better serve the people of California. Right, so we're looking at test cases in a more limited environment. But then we've got to get to these bigger questions about how do we create a regulatory framework that will create some rules of the road. And the industry is asking us to do it, but there's not yet agreement on exactly what that should look like.
I think the first couple of things, I'm going to try to tie a few things together. Don't do anything to us. Don't do anything for it. Do it with us. So the carrot and stick. I'd love the carrot to be so big that it was a stick. So no harm on the other end. Work with us to make that carrot a stick. But underpinning all of that, I'm going to circle back to infrastructure for a minute. California's infrastructure is built for 20 million people 40 years ago. We have to catch up to make it possible so that it does address the affordable housing issue, et cetera. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough power. We don't have enough roads. And we're trying to hang on to the fringes of this innovation, and we will be the leaders of innovation and technology in the future, but we're going to be limping along across the finish line, and we have to get that sorted out, fairly quickly. 20 million people, 40 million people and infrastructure for 20 million. We've got to get that turned around.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bone from PPIC. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of the sectors and businesses that we're talking about in the innovation sphere are concentrated on the coast. So my question is about what would it take for inland California to also be part of the potential benefits that we're talking about?
I'll just hit manufacturing real quickly. There's 30,000 manufacturers in California. 25,000 of them are small or medium, typically family-owned, multi-generational manufacturers that you don't ever see because they're inland. They're in the north, they're in the Inland Empire, they're elsewhere. There is a concentration of large manufacturers. Tesla is the largest manufacturer in California under one roof. They fluctuate with their employment, but between 25,000, give or take. That's pretty significant, but there are 1.3 million workers in the manufacturing sector, and they're not all, in the Bay Area and concentrated. My job would be to expand manufacturing everywhere that it could exist in California, and it exists because of where you're located and transportation to get it to the next place, which is why I talk about infrastructure so much. The three biggest things humankind has ever invented or developed: manufacturing, transportation, and communication. You got to make things for civilization. You got to get it to the people who need it, and you have to communicate so that you can buy it, coordinate, and share with it. Those are the three, in my view. I'm not an anthropologist, but those three things really have set, our civilization more forward than anything else.
Sorry, I forgot what the, yes, you dazzled me. I was so concentrating on, so how do we spread innovation, right, more broadly across the state? That's something that we've been thinking about, right, and the state, the governor's been thinking about for quite a while, and how do we create bottom-up regional economic development, right, that helps regions understand what their strengths are, and a lot of those strengths are more affordable housing, better access to power, right? Some of the things, less congested roads, access to good community colleges and public schools. So we divided the state. We created something it was originally called the Community Economic Resilience fund. Now it's called Jobs First, California Jobs First, because that is the goal here, is to create good jobs for people, but to do it working with communities and providing resources for communities. So we divided the state into 13 regions. And the governor really started this by looking at the inland areas of the state, like Kern County, where we know there's going to be a difficult and painful transition away from fossil fuels as we move towards a zero carbon economy. So how do we help those communities plan a future that invests in industries of the future, that can create good jobs of the futures, and bring some of those technologies and those jobs that are created by these new technologies into other parts of the state? And so we're in the middle of that now. We're going to invest $600 million over the course of a few years, and that's also going to draw a lot of private capital. And we're really excited about that opportunity, again, because working with those communities, and then you can layer all kinds of other initiatives into that planning process, into that communication process where communities are working together. So very important, but again, bottom up, community-led, sustainable economic growth.
Great. So I think we're about out of time. I want to encourage you to join us in our reception outside right afterward. I want to thank Dee Dee Myers, Daniel Lim, and Lance Hastings. And thanks to the UC Center, the Anderson School for hosting us, and you all for your attention and participation today. Thank you. One more round of applause for our panelists.